The trend of black people relocating from major northern and western cities to suburbs or to the south has accelerated over the past decade. U.S. Census data shows that 9 out of 10 cities with the highest concentrations of black residents have experienced substantial population declines in those black communities over the past 20 years. This reverse migration holds especially true for the city of Chicago. In 1980, about 40% of Chicago's population was black, but as of 2020, the black community has only accounts for 29% of Chicago's residents. This shrinkage stands in contrast to the black people who surged into the city during the Great Migration. Former Chicago residents have cited crime and increase in cost of living, policing unfavorable to black communities, and systemic racism as their rationale for relocating. Joining us to discuss is Professor of History and African American Studies at Georgetown, Marcia Chatelain. Professor Chatelain, what is your take on what is happening in these cities, particularly in Chicago?
Well, one of the things we have to keep in mind when we look at Chicago is the fact that in the late 1990s, they adopted a plan to reduce the impact of public housing on the city and sent people through the voucher system who were scattered throughout the city. Some had left for other parts of the Midwest. So we have the decline of public housing, as well as the loss of jobs, the lack of services, and the closing of many neighborhood and local schools that were central to galvanizing communities. And so the shifts that we see in Chicago, I think, are emblematic of the post 1980 um, pinch on Black communities and Black people who were searching for better quality of life and lower cost of living in other places.
So this shift comes at, there are multiple, I make this argument, there are multiple great migrations happening all at the same time. One is a reverse migration of white people out of the burbs and back into the cities. Mostly young college educated white kids are moving back into the city centers. These things overlap. So that puts housing pressure on existing families, existing communities, makes it more expensive to live there. But also very often politicians, police forces see these new young white faces in neighborhoods and they want to make them feel safe and protected. And so they swarm in with more policing on the existing communities. So what do you think is the interplay overall about what is going to happen in the next decade or 2 or 3 around racial compositions of city centers?
Well, what we're going to see is the continued growth of the racial and ethnic diversity in the suburbs. This idea as the suburbs meaning white is no longer true in so many parts of the country. And I think that our political parties have yet to catch up with it in the ways that we put the broad brush of suburban to mean white. So that's going to be the first one. I think the second thing we're going to see in parts of the country that have limited housing stock, like Washington, D.C., where I live, is the continued move of gentrification. And as long as real estate becomes the investment vehicle for white people with wealth, we're going to see this incredibly hot housing market. And the thing that I'm really worried about is something that I witnessed as a Chicagoan growing up during those years of the reverse migration, where Black people will go to cities that have lower costs of living, but will then find themselves in a housing market and a rental market that is overheated, as we've seen already. And they'll see themselves moving to cities that are having economic opportunities based on the service industry. And these are industries that are sometimes very unstable during times of economic crisis. And so there'll be a lot of vulnerability for those Black reverse migrants. And I think we saw a lot of that in the 1990s and early 2000s in places like Atlanta, Las Vegas, and Dallas, where the economies, when they're strong, they work for Black folks. But the second there's any kind of shift in the economic structure, Black people are the first people to feel it.
So speaking of Atlanta, I live now in Atlanta, is a big recipient of reverse migrants from the north and west, but the Atlanta metro area is, but the city of Atlanta, not so much. So the 2020 census, Atlanta finally loses its majority Black designation. It is now, the Black population has now fallen below 50% for the first time since 1970. So even in places that are receiving these reverse migrants, they're going out into suburban spaces rather than congregating in the center of cities. And what we see in the center of city in Atlanta is the influx of young white residents. What does all of this suburbanization of blackness mean for political power?
Well, what we're going to see are instances like we saw in Chicago recently, where there is a real power struggle about districting. The ward system in Chicago has allowed for a lot of the political victories we saw with the first Black mayor, Harold Washington, and a young Barack Obama. And so I think that there are going to be more and more claims of redistricting, the needing to shift for racial balance. And I think that the people who are going to feel it the most are the Black and brown children who are now in school systems that never anticipated their presence. And we're going to also see the question of what kind of services are going to be available in these suburbs in terms of transportation and jobs, if there is a sense that the city center, as it gets wider, is the most important part for investment.
And are we seeing a rise, a new form of segregation? Many of these big urban cities, New York, Chicago, what have you, have tremendous segregation issues both within the cities and also as a result in their public school systems. Is there a threat that segregation is on the rise and becomes a threat to the well-being of community, particularly Black communities?
Well, I think we've always seen segregation as at the center of the Black experience. What I am afraid of is that as we have an erosion of a Black middle class, we have an erosion of a tax base. And we know that so many of our politicians respond to this idea that taxpayers, in terms of property owners, in terms of people who earn high incomes, are the ones that they listen to. And so I think what we're going to see is greater social stratification and fewer ways for poor Black communities to assert themselves politically. And when they're kind of brought into these suburban structures, structures that were designed to starve tax revenues from cities, I think we're going to see incredible reversals in terms of taxation as well as development projects. And so this is a critical issue. And, if you're going to run for office in the next 10 to 15 years, please pay attention to this electorate, because as much as the political parties are obsessed with white working class voters, they've completely lost sight of the fact that the suburbs have new populations that can also be galvanized politically for the greater good.
Some people believe that part of the violence issue in places like Detroit, and I'm sorry, Chicago, is that they've basically been drained of the middle class. The middle class were the people who had the money to move, either to the burbs or back south, and that so what is left is very well-to-do Black people who can afford the new, surging prices, and also a class of Black people who are, very relatively poor. And that draining these cities of their middle class actually exacerbates the stigma and issues that people try to lay on big cities. What do you think about this idea of the strain of a kind of shrinking middle class, Black middle class in these cities is having on Black communities and the kind of culture of the cities?
Well, one of the things I always caution against is this idea of, romanticizing the presence of middle class. Black middle class people are not immune to police brutality and, state terror. So let's be, really careful about that. But I think what you're pointing to is the ways that the imagined or real middle class constituency can bring in a level of political power that unfortunately too many of our political parties and our politicians ignore the poor. I think what has happened in cities like Chicago, when you have depopulation, you have fewer people and you also have fewer jobs and fewer resources. And so I don't know if the solution is the Black middle class has to stay in certain neighborhoods, but we rather need to have investment in the quality of people's lives. And in a city like Chicago that has a Black mayor, that has a thriving Black middle class, the focus needs to be on jobs, good schools, good healthcare, good opportunities for public space, and they need to get the police to stop terrorizing people. And I think that we'll see incredible transformations in all neighborhoods when that happens.
Marcia Chatelain, author of Southside Girls and the Pulitzer Prize winning book, Franchise, The Golden Arches in Black America. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate your time.